Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of Third Culture Africans. I hope you're all doing well as we continue to soldier on through pandemic and lockdowns around the world, as well as some countries who have curfews. On this week's episode, my guest is Ifeyinwa Frederick, one of the duo of a new revolutionary concept of African food. She's a self-confessed overachiever and believes that social dining is an intricate part of African culture. Chop, Chat, Chill is the slogan that goes with their business. And she's an incredible talent who is a well-being advocate. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did sitting with Ifeyinwa and really just following through her journey today. Welcome to another episode of Third Culture Africans. I am your host, Zeza Oriaiki Sal. I created the show as a resource for our community of Africans and African diaspora. A safe and honest place to share, inspire, motivate, and most importantly, celebrate those in our communities doing purposeful work and shifting the needle on our culture. Your support is invaluable to the show, so please subscribe or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. You are valid, you are strong, and you are just getting started. Hi, Ifeyinwa. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Third Culture Africans.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, so before we came on and started talking, we had a brief discussion about names. And you were like, well, I don't really like being called Ife. So I'd like to be introduced by my real name, which is Ifeyinwa Frederick. And I said, I planned on using Ifeyinwa. And your response was, well, growing up in the UK, I guess I'll let you kind of expand on that a little bit more and why you like to formally be introduced as, you know, what your name is actually, Ifeyinwa.
So I don't have a problem, in fact, being called Ife. I'm someone that shortens most people's names anyway. Like most of my friends end up being called something that's one syllable. But it's just that my name is Ifeyinwa. In particular, my name is Ifeyinwa Frederick. And basically I've got my dad's surname and a Nigerian first name, which comes from my mother's Nigerian heritage. So for me, my name is very much a full representation of who I'm from, of where I'm from rather. And so if someone's seen my name and they've automatically gone to ask, oh, is there something shorter they can call me? It really winds me up because you haven't tried and you don't know. And actually my name isn't that, well, most names aren't difficult to say if you just listen to people phonetically. And so for me, it's more a case of, I don't mind people going around calling me Ife, but I want you to know that that's a shortened version of my full name, which is Ifeyinwa. And I like to have, so with all my work, whether it's interviews to do with the restaurant or my writing, it's always attributed to Ifeyinwa Frederick because that's who I am. And I want that name to kind of sing out loud. And so I have actually, since we started the restaurants, I've had a few sticky moments with people as well. In particular, people of Nigerian heritage who've been Yoruba, who've again shortened my name but played with it and thought it was something else. And I remember one guy telling me I was saying my name wrong, and I'm like, I'm not saying it wrong. I'm not Yoruba, so when I'm saying Ife, it's Ife. It's not Ife. And yeah. And I just have this big thing. So for me, my name has always been, whether it's actually from people in the UK or actually other Nigerians, it's been a real, often a point of conversation that I haven't necessarily always wanted to have. And so I'm really quite precious over it. And also it means something very beautiful. So my name means there's nothing like a child. And it's something I'm very proud of. So yeah, I like it to be there when it can be.
Amazing. So I was saying in season 1, it was something that I would talk about actually more often than not, because I think season 1 for me was really establishing, I guess, some of the challenges you have as a third culture kid growing up in a different culture. But most specifically, I think within our community as Africans, this tends to happen often, where, we all shorten our names. Like my full name is not Zeze, but even I was born in a different city to where my parents were from. So my name automatically was shortened. And I've actually never used my full name other than on my passport or when I'm doing anything like super professional. But everybody knows me as Zeza. So I definitely understand. And I think that's something that is seemingly common with a lot of, I guess, third culture Africans across the world. So it's interesting that even amongst ourselves, those nuances still persist as well as in the wider world. But we digress. Let's jump right into why you're actually on the show. So you are one of the duo of the infamous Chukus London, dubbed the best of Nigeria in London. Your brother and yourself, Emeka, opened up in 2016, quite a pioneering concept for food in the UK called Chukus London.
Yeah, it's been some journey from when we started in 2016 as a pop-up to where we are today with our own permanent premises. It's I almost don't know where to begin. There are so many parts of it that sort of running through my head.
Well, I guess starting off with, the most obvious part, which is one, family business, working with a sibling, and birthing an idea. So I have got a number of questions, but I think my first one would be around the inception or the inspiration or what sparked the idea for both of you to go into business with the concept of Chikus London, and what is Chikus London?
So it's just to clarify, it's just Chikus. So our social media handles have
Oh,
the
okay.
London, and the website's got London. So it is a number of people do it. It gets a bit confusing, but we are just Chikus. But the idea came about because of where we're from. And I mean that in the broadest sense. So A, because of our Nigerian heritage, but also where we grew up, which was on the border of East London and Essex. So that meant where we were growing up, there weren't really places where we could experience Nigerian culture or eat the food really out that was accessible to us outside of our family home. And I think growing up, it used to be something like we used to half jokingly complain about, like, oh, we have to go so far. Oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had a place on our doorstep or more accessible? And at the same time, we were going to schools and in environments where we were mixing with all sorts of people from all sorts of cultures. And when it came to people's birthdays and celebrations, there was nearly like always an opportunity for us to share in their culture, maybe at another restaurant or something like that. But then if we'd wanted to do the same thing, it wasn't as easy for us to do. And a bar like someone coming over and having jollof in our house, it wasn't so easy for us to create a space to find a space rather.
Infamous jollof.
It wasn't
Universal jollof is.
Jollof is that is like one of my friends. I remember her first taste of it in school, and she was like, "What's in your lunchbox?" And I was like, "I have something." And she was like, "What is this?" Like because she had fallen in love, and that was the reception that our food always got when we let our friends try it and they had the opportunity to experience it. And so as we were getting older, it kind of wasn't making sense to us. The food was great. The culture that people experienced when they were around us loved it, and we loved it. And yet at the same time, there weren't many places where we could experience it. And so, but we knew that because people loved it, the issue really isn't like do you know what I mean? It's more, there isn't something yet that exists that is given space to it.
But would that be accurate though? Because there are Nigerian restaurants. So when you say,
So it's not that there weren't Nigerian restaurants, and that's why I started with where I grew up, because I grew up on the border of East London and Essex, and near us at that time, there weren't many Nigerian restaurants that were easily accessible. So, I mean, they weren't in places where me and my friends were frequenting already, but other restaurants were, and that's what I'm talking about. It's not that there haven't been Nigerian restaurants. There have been, because that's where we used to go, but they would always be quite a journey from us. And if we were now talking about saying to friends, if you as a group, you're going, oh yeah, let's meet up here. If we were going to places like Shoreditch, so to speak, and that's where the night's motive is, going to, I don't know, maybe Southeast London, that's a detour from where we were wanting to end up for the evening. And that's more, I mean, that there weren't opportunities for us to share in our culture in the places where we were going. And so actually when we set up Chikus and when we planned to find our own place, our location was what was really important. For us, we wanted to be in an accessible location, somewhere obvious on a high street where people, wherever they're coming from, could get to. So the restaurant, for example, you can get to from the city within like 25 minutes or so, because of that specific issue we'd had growing up.
Amazing. And so taking that, you guys, then created, I guess, what is the UK's first Nigerian tapas restaurant, and tapas being the concept around the dishes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the tapas is more than just the sharing plates. I think that's what most people readily understand it as. But Emeka was the one that had lived in Madrid before. And when we were talking about the concept, we decided that we wanted to do sharing plates and smaller plates of dishes so that people could try a wide range of Nigerian flavors. So, we know that Nigeria is a very diverse country. And we know, for example, that our menu doesn't even do justice to the culinary diversity. And what we didn't want is for people to come to the restaurant and try one dish because it was a main menu, a main meal, and then not like that dish and decide they knew Nigerian cuisine because of that. And so in giving people smaller sharing plates, it was about giving people an opportunity to try a wider range of Nigerian flavors. And so as we were talking, we said, yeah, that's a really good idea. People can have a bit of that. And also, again, it made it more accessible. If you're trying a cuisine for the first time, then you're not committing yourself to one dish, and you can think, okay, well, even if I didn't like X, maybe there'll be something else that I like. And then as we had that conversation about the sharing plates, Emeka said, oh, this reminds me a bit about tapas. And tapas, and then he was explaining how tapas is a very much a social dining concept. Like you go with your friends, it's very sociable. And as he was expressing that to me, we were like, that's just our culture. That's Nigerian culture. It's funny, like, I guess tapas is considered a social dining concept, but most people, well, I guess Nigeria in some ways is almost absent from the food discussions at the moment, and it's kind of in coming in now. But most people don't necessarily automatically think of describing Nigeria as being social dining, but Nigerian culture is centered around social dining. Nigerians get together around food. Like that's what we
This
do.
is true.
So we are at our heart. Social dining culture is at the heart of who we are. And so for us, using
food is love. Have a headache, eat food.
It is.
Anything is wrong. Here's some food.
If you and your friends gather, or if you've gone to someone's house and there's not even a slight offer of something.
What? And they offer you crisps. It's like, what? We went there and they didn't even give us food.
It doesn't make...
Only water, no drinks. If you have a headache, your mom says, have you eaten?
It is. Everything begins and ends with food for us. Like it means everything.
Very true.
And so
yeah.
And so that's where the tapas element came in, as in it was really for us, it was just a really easy way of conveying the sharing plates plus the social dining. That's essentially what tapas is. And that's what we felt, that's what we wanted to do in terms of presenting the menu in sharing plates, but also Chuku's was going to be a restaurant that was about social dining and having that social atmosphere, that kind of convivial atmosphere that I think that Nigerians have when they get together. Very much, I think we're very much big-hearted, traditionally big-hearted, open-hearted people.
Yeah, eating is social. You get around in the kitchen. Like, the kitchen is the place where you hang out. Even as kids, right? Teenage kids, your friends will come round. I remember one of my early experiences, because unlike you, I moved here in my preteens or early teens, actually. And I remember like friends would come to hang out, and, it was almost like an ushering into your room, and you're thinking, but hold on a minute, like we're not that close to make it to my room yet. Like, we make it to the kitchen, we make it to like communal areas. And I remember one of those sort of it was like a cultural moment for me, because actually culturally, the kids go and play in rooms. Whereas growing up in Africa, you started in a communal place. Like, you would always say, do you want something to drink? And then you would go to the kitchen, and then you would offer them something to drink, and then you'd hang about in the kitchen for a very long time because it's a communal space. And then, you didn't really want to be in the living room because everybody had access to it. So the kitchen was almost kind of a little bit off limits. And then from there, you would make it outside. So to further your point. This podcast is sponsored by Malay Natural Science. Malay's products are inspired by the rich landscapes, alluring scents, and ancient wisdom of Africa. Their luxurious fragrance and body care range balances 100% natural active ingredients and scientifically proven formulas to heal, protect, and pamper your skin. Malay ships worldwide, and you can buy their products at maleeonline.com. They also offer a free sample if you'd like to try. Back to Chukus, and to touch on a few things that you mentioned around sort of the concept being birth. Now, was this idea happening for both yourself and your brother at the same time? And how does that then evolve into, okay, why don't we go ahead and do this?
So the original idea began many years ago. And so we spoke years ago about having our own Nigerian restaurant. And for years we would back and forth ideas. But in that way you do when it's like not committed. You're like, oh, wouldn't it be good if, oh, that could be cool. But no one's really moving on it. And then Emeka went to uni, and then I went to uni, and then he was away, and then I was away. And it was when I was away that's when Emeka started doing dinner parties. He had some friends over, and he started whipping up some dishes and sharing with them. And then he sent me pictures of the dinner parties that he was having. And I was like, this is exciting. Let's talk about this when we get home. And so it's when I got home, that's when we started having the conversation specifically about what became Chikus. So the conversation had moved from being, oh, wouldn't it be interesting to do a Nigerian restaurant one day? What might that be? To now we were actually having a conversation about the concept itself. So that's when we were talking about the social dining atmosphere. That's when we were talking about the sharing plates. And I remember exactly where we were when we came up with Chop Chat Chill. We were sat in our sofa in our living room. And so that part of the conversation, so that birthing of Chikus as it is today, was kind of happening along together off the back of the dinner parties that Emeka had like this that summer, I think it was.
Amazing. And so you mentioned going to university, and I will be amiss if I don't include this section, because I'm sure your parents will think I paid all of that money. So you know what I mean? So you studied classics. Did I hit the nail on the head?
No, but why I'm laughing so much is because I recently said to someone, do you know what? For all the studying I've done, I've never applied for a job since with my uni degree. And no one asked me about my degree. No one asked me about all my education, all about money. So let's talk about it. Yeah.
I am today. This is for Mr. and Mrs. Frederick. This one is for you, Mummy and Daddy. When you listen to this, you studied classics at Cambridge.
Yeah.
Which is one, quite a sought after program, and two, to have gotten into that program as a Black woman, I'm sure in today's world mustn't have been easy.
So there weren't many of us on the course, Black women, but I think that starts from before the university, as in Latin. So that's what I studied. I studied Latin at school, which is what enabled me to apply for classics. Latin and classics aren't courses that are widely available. And actually, as I was going through the process, I remember talking to an organization that works with improving access to classics within all schools. And I know for someone listening, they might be like, who the hell cares about this? Like, why does that matter? But for me, I think it really does. Like, I absolutely loved classics as a course. I loved learning Latin. And I think so many other people or so many other children would love it as well. The stories are great. And it just feels such a shame that it's a subject that is essentially not available to you if you go to a particular school. And I think that's kind of where the issue kind of starts a lot earlier on in terms of the access to that course in your secondary school. So you don't even know it's an option. Yet when I talk to people about my degree and what I studied, which was essentially ancient philosophy, ancient history, Latin, and ancient Greek. And when I talk about the stories or the things I learn, like, people love it. Like, today you've got Ryan Holiday, whose books are so popular. His books are Stoic philosophy repackaged. So classics is clearly something that would like resonate with a lot of people. I'm so passionate about it. Like, honestly, I love my course. I'm to this day, I'm a classics geek. And so, yeah, and I do really feel it's such a shame that so many people don't even know it's a thing that was available to them to study, or they couldn't have studied simply because of the school they went to. But it was definitely an interesting 3 years, an intense 3 years. I don't think up until that age I'd been so uncomfortable, because school was relatively easy. And then I went to Cambridge and I was like, oh, baptism of fire.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling like I was floundering a lot. But I think that was really important experience for me, to be honest. I think it's enabled me to do what I do today and become the person I am, because everything had been quite easy for me. Like, going through the school process, everything I applied for, I got, blah, 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 blah. Even applying to Cambridge, which you're told is a difficult thing, I still got. And it was always, up until that point, I had always been at the top. And then I go to this institution and it was like, becoming the top was challenging. That was like, the top, I guess, would have been me leaving with a first, which I didn't do. And actually, I remember getting into my final year and being like, I'm not interested in a first. I'm not interested in doing what it might take for me to get a first. I'm interested. There were other things I wanted to do in my final year. And the person that arrived at the university would never have said that. Like, I wouldn't have even been able to comprehend not getting the top goal, because for me, without realizing it, I think I'd actually started to over-identify myself with like my academic successes. And that's been like a process that I've been on a journey of unlearning. And so, like, dissociating from the work that I do and dissociating from my achievements and separating myself from them so as not to tie up my identity into sort of external successes. But that process was kickstarted by going to Cambridge, because all of a sudden being the top and being the best became a really difficult endeavor to maintain. And it made me question, and then it started to make me think, what else is there, and how else do I want to live? But classics is amazing. Basically, just a plug for classics.
No, but I think, what often doesn't happen is we hear the stories of the after, right? Like, the end destination, but seldomly do we ever really walk the journey with people on the during, right? Like, so someone will walk past, Chukus, or would have seen, your very successful crowdfunding project, or seen that you guys have 20 plus of a social community online for a physical business. And these are all things that I want to kind of tap into, but I'm summarizing here. So go with me, and not realize that perhaps the journey, and look, neither yourself or Emeka are trained chefs. Now, further down the line, the upskilling happens, and, he's able to create these experiences, etc. But the beginnings of it are of someone who loved Latin and studied classics at Cambridge. That is the starting part of the journey. And I guess that question was to lead into building a business around your strengths is usually something I say when I give a talk or consult or whatever. And this is perhaps the thing that everybody says, but yet you guys have built Chukus as, none of you were master chefs before this. I guess there's something around knowing, like, as you've said, culture, being culture, creating it for other people's consumption. And, what level of expertise takes you from, classics to, having a 10 out of 10 rated restaurant, or, on Google 4.9 stars, which pretty much doesn't happen to any restaurant on Google. What takes you there from, two siblings who just wanted to share something that they felt was beautiful about their heritage and their relationship with food?
So I actually don't think what happened is too dissimilar to your advice, which is I do think I did build a business around my strengths. I think Emeka and I both did. So, firstly, I would say that what I learned at university with the essay a week and titles that I didn't understand was how to do something that I didn't know how to do. And as in, when you don't know how to do something or you don't know how to answer a question, where to begin, like that in itself is a very particular thing, because so often there is something someone wants to do but they don't know where to start, and because they don't know where to start they don't do it. But I actually think at university I got quite good at doing things that I didn't know how to do, because that was every week I'd get this essay title, I'd be like, I don't even know where to begin with this, like where do I start? And I got quite, I don't think I noticed it at the time, but I was getting quite used to being uncomfortable. And actually, I think most of my experiences growing up were uncomfortable. From I was someone that was doing interviews for schools from the age of like 10 or whatever, and just often in environments that where I was learning how to present myself and to shape my ideas. So I think that skill set is what enabled me to start a restaurant with my brother when neither of us had hospitality experience, because I didn't know what to do, but I knew how to find out what I needed to do. And I feel like I'd been trained in that, in being okay with, okay, I don't know the answer yet, but I know how to find it. And then similarly, I think one of my strengths is coming up with ideas. Like my mind buzzes with ideas. Since we've started Chikus, I've had so many other ideas. I'm constantly having writing ideas, and I literally like just jot stuff down. And some ideas I'll never do. And actually, with Chikus, it was like a blank slate, and I just got to come up with ideas. Just how would we do this? How would we do that? And I think the fact that neither of us came from a hospitality background, was so freeing, because we weren't hung by any rules. It was like, well, what do we want to do? What do we want to see? And I would argue my strength was restaurants. I'd never worked in a restaurant, but I'd eaten and I like food. I love food. I love going to restaurants. And to this day, I tell people all the time, I love food, to the point, like, it's what I think about. I was thinking about today, what will I eat before I record? Because I want to make sure I've eaten before we speak. Like, I think about food all the time. It plays such an important role in my life. And so when coming up with the restaurant, it was like, okay, how do we convey that to people? How do we bring that out? And ultimately, I didn't know how to run a restaurant, but a restaurant sits within the hospitality industry. And I know how to be hospitable. That is a strength of mine. I know how to make people feel welcome. I know how to be open-hearted. I know how to make you feel special, and have a special moment. And I like to think my friends would agree with that. Do you know what I mean? And actually, that's something. And bringing people together is something I have always personally enjoyed doing. So Chikus does work to my strengths in a number of ways. And I think that's why when doing it, I feel so fulfilled, because it really enables me to tap into a number of things. I just think sometimes your strengths are maybe packaged up differently. So maybe it looked more obvious that I would go and start a performing arts school because I was always doing dance and drama. But actually, like, those same skill sets is what allowed me to manifest itself into Chikus. And also, I think that restaurants are like a piece of theatre anyway, as well. Like, when you watch them, you've got the behind the scenes when everyone's gathering before we open, and then you open, it's like performance time.
Even just how the waiters arrive, ordering the food. I can tell you in lockdown how many times I have dreamt of a restaurant experience, and just seeing the plate arrive and the song and dance in your mind that's happening as that plate is in front of you. But I think the proof is in the pudding. Time Out's Best of Nigeria and London, writing recipes for the likes of Telegraph, etc. So, I think you guys have been able to, I guess, to a critic's, I guess, narrative is, stick it to them and go, hey, but, we've got this, we've got an experience, we've got chop chill or chop chat chill, and which has stuck and is sticking, and has even stuck into the pandemic. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of businesses, in the last year have taken a huge knock, have all had to find ways to pivot, have all had to find ways to adjust to the current climate. And I really wanted to talk about how you guys, as what is considered a face-to-face physical business, especially where the concept is all around sort of the social element, and how you guys have successfully digitized that, and you were able to convey that early on in the journey, pre-lockdown and COVID and pandemic, and you've managed to still keep that through this period. Do you mind sharing a little bit around that, or even just
So I think
the inception?
an advantage we had in a way was that for a very long time we didn't have a physical space. So Chikus turned 5 at the start of this year, but we only got our permanent place 4 years in. So that meant for 4 years we were building a community without having a regular spot around which people could gather. But in those 4 years before we opened that permanent space, I think we were successful in building a community, and we'd found a way to kind of convey that social element and bringing of people together. And so I think that meant that when the lockdown happened, we knew it was definitely possible for us to continue doing that even without our physical space. The question was just how. And so one of the things, we went back to, and we always go back to, is Chop Chat Chill. And what are we about? And we're about Nigerian culture and bringing people together and community. And so it really came about, what things can we do during this time that will continue to celebrate the culture, to share the culture and bring people together. And during the first lockdown, that looked like we held Nollywood, not Netflix parties. I love Nollywood, and so we would get everyone together.
Guilty pleasure.
I love it.
Guilty pleasure.
We'd get people together to watch a Nollywood film, and then we'd all be able to use the Netflix party, I think it's like app or Chrome extension. We'd all be able to share and have a conversation together. And that was really brilliant because we were getting people to watch, some people to watch Nollywood for the first time. And we were having this, it was like being at the cinema with your mates, essentially, like having this real time conversation about the film we were watching. And some of the comments were so funny. And I think my favorite one was when we watched Up North. Because that film, which is set in
beautiful Bauchi, cinematography, by the way, and a great way to showcase the North. Yeah,
for so many Nigerians who maybe live here and only really know Lagos, they were like, "Whoa, I've not seen this part of Nigeria either." And so it was that was one of my favorite films for us to have shared, because I think it really gave people an insight into wow, this country really is diverse. I thought I knew it. And then I remember because there's a scene where they go on the hunt. I think they go on the hunt for suya. And then someone was like, "Oh, what's suya?" And then we were having a conversation about that. And then someone else was sending links about the best places to find it in Nigeria. And so that was one of the ways that we were just able to continue sharing the culture and bringing people together. And then we also held virtual supper clubs, which was essentially a digitizing of what we'd done as a pop-up. And everyone would gather at a particular time with their meal. We'd all eat together. We'd all share a learning. And during that time, there were questions that we would put together. And that was really lovely, bringing together people over food, which I think is, again, what Nigerian culture does so well and so often. And it really did matter that people came together to eat, and people enjoyed it and would share it, have a toast. And then we also started our Chuku's chat series. So for a long time, we had on the blog interviews with Nigerians that were doing interesting things, whose work that we wanted to share with the community. But we'd really wanted to make it a video series. But Emeka and I had just never got around to doing it. So we used the lockdown as an opportunity to do that. And that was, for me personally, that gave me so much life, having these one-to-one conversations with people at what was quite a difficult time, and actually hearing their stories I found quite encouraging and inspiring. And it kind of, each time we'd have an interview, it would really uplift me. And I was so excited again to be able to share those stories with the community, and then people would essentially digitally gather, I guess, around them to listen to them and to watch them. And so those were that during the first lockdown, those are the ways in which we first started in kind of keeping our community together, bringing people together. And I think ultimately just recognizing it was a difficult time for a lot of people. And so we were really selective with the content that we were sharing, and that we sought to be like a space of positivity for people, even just from the artwork that we choose to share. So on our Instagram, we always share art from Nigerian artists. And during that time, we were like particularly looking for vibrant, uplifting pieces of art to share to kind of make people's day slightly brighter. And then second time round, second lockdown, we brought to fruition something we actually began working on during the first lockdown, which was our at-home offering. So our Chop Chat Chill ready meal kits. And so in the first lockdown, we'd nailed the food around them. We knew what that was going to look like. It was going to have certain elements from our tapas menu, but we were going to bring them all together in a wrap for people to finish off at home. But we'd always been clear that just like the restaurant and everything else we did, it needed to be beyond food, and there needed to be a way that we were bringing the culture to people's door as well. And so that was what took a bit longer. And so now that looks like a QR code that you scan when you get your kit, and it takes you to a page on our website. And we've got a playlist of Nigerian music. There's Nigerian art. There's a short film. There's a proverb as well. So there's a whole sort of introduction, I guess, to the culture again. So whilst you can't come to the restaurant and have it all there on our walls, whilst you're at home, you can have this sort of Nigerian evening and experience the food as well as some other elements of the culture.
Amazing. And you guys were still able to create that unique twist on Nigerian dishes, which is, I've used the word unique, so ingenious. That would be a better word. Ingenious. Even just, and some of it is still quite linked to tradition, like ways that certain tribes would traditionally prepare things. Like I remember the first time I saw, your egusi balls and how you guys were presenting just egusi as a dish to people. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, because there's certain cultures that cook the egusi in the again, soup stew in balls. And oh my God, and actually, like Spanish food, African food doesn't lend itself to being overly dressed, like, and I guess I would say that's what I loved the most about seeing what you guys were able to do. And then just watching you guys digitize something that, historically and is quite difficult to digitize. Like it's near enough impossible, right? And most restaurants have tried to pivot and adjust to that and the experiences thereof. And just watching that journey, especially in our space, where you guys were already starting to break barriers and have, African food be accessible, and accessible beyond a sort of novel kitsch experience, but in a cultural and meaningful way. And I know I've used several words to describe the feeling. And so just giving your flowers on that. But moving into, I guess, more about yourself as, I guess, mindset of entrepreneurs, yourself, your brother, and into creating this concept. And we're all navigating, the pandemic for the first time. No one's ever done this before. No one has the blueprint on how you can succeed. But you alongside this, still make use of your classics degree. And you've, written plays, which have been shortlisted for, the Tony Craze Award, the Verity Hargett Award, and a few others, which wouldn't be out of your depth considering you went to Cambridge, because overachieving is part of the game, right? But you've openly spoken about burnout. And I think feeling depleted, tired, stressed is something everybody, I think, is going through this pandemic. I guess I wanted to talk to you more around, I guess, your therapy, which is dance. And, you started dance school at 16. I'm throwing it all in very, very long sentences here. I really am. But
the true Nigerian way, we're never short about anything.
No, I'm throwing it all in because I think I'm trying to paint a vivid picture of, I guess, often people think entrepreneurship is, just one way, and multifaceted. You're concurrently doing things to a high standard, but it comes at a cost, which you've openly spoken about, which is burning out, and finding ways of navigating something that we're all sharing now commonly just due to the pressures of how we're living. And just wondered if you could talk a little bit more around balancing, talent, skill, passion, ambition, and then the reality of, hey, I'm burnt out.
Yeah, I have so much to say about this. So firstly, I just think that we have a problem as society, which doesn't, where I think we're all valued on how productive we can be, or that's at least how we think. And so it's become this weird toxic thing where
you're your job title and the bank balance.
But also I think if you think about the last few times you spoke to your friends and how often someone told you they're tired, it's just such a normal thing for someone to say, oh yeah, I'm tired
of being tired. I'm tired of being tired.
That we wake up in the morning and you're tired, but tired, not sleeping, working really hard are seem to be celebrated. And one of the reasons I am so vocal about this is because had I watched someone else be vocal about it, had I watched someone else say they're going to bed and they're getting sleep and blah, 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 I probably wouldn't have done some of the things I did. And I probably would have taken more time for rest. And ultimately I didn't, because I believed wrongly at the time that sleep and other such things were secondary and that I needed to work nonstop essentially to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And if anyone is listening to this, I really don't think that's the case, because when you're burnt out and you're literally lying in your bed and your brain can't think, you can't read, you can't write in a sentence is so difficult for you, you cannot even possibly work towards any of your dreams. You can't. And that is genuinely the reality that a lot of us are risking heading towards, or some other sort of physical illness. And so actually
increased cortisol levels, stress.
Yeah, and a lot of us will be doing damage to our adrenal glands as well. But had I taken more time to rest, I probably would have just been able to continue for longer, but at a more consistent pace. Whereas what I actually did was, in the space of about 2 or 3 years, I essentially had 3 burnouts. And because I would go really hard, then it would happen. I'd be like, okay, cool, let me rest. And then I'd rest for a week. You don't recover from burnout in a week, can I just say? You don't. You think you do, but you don't. And then I would go again, and then I'd do the same thing again. But I'd be like, no, I've learned this time. I'm doing a lot better. And I'd lie to myself really well. And it's really easy to lie. I'm only doing what's important. There aren't that many things that are that important. And then it happened again. And I think it was around the final time. And I remember just thinking, this is ridiculous. And I would get to the point where I'd make myself unhappy, even though the things I did individually I loved. And I was like, the problem isn't my work, the problem is me and the relationship I've built between myself, my work, and my well-being. And I've built this narrative that I have to sacrifice myself to be successful. And for some reason, being successful felt more important than looking after myself because of the way that I'd been nurtured essentially by society. And so I've spent a lot of
Can you
time
say that again?
recalibrating that.
Can you say that
So,
again? Being
so
successful
had started to feel more important than my well-being because of the way I'd been nurtured by society. And so I've spent a lot of time recalibrating that because I recognize actually if I got all the things I wanted, and at the time, restaurant opening plays, all the stuff, shows on, blah, blah, blah. If I got all of those things, but I kept ending up in this way, burning out, like I wouldn't be able to enjoy them. So what was I doing it for? And I really had to ask myself a lot of questions. And I'll be very honest and frank. These are questions I still ask myself because it takes a long time to undo habits. There's times I find myself checking emails when I don't need to be. I like convince myself that I need to do something important because essentially I'm looking for a dopamine hit because maybe I'm feeling a bit low confidence that day. And actually I'm looking for something that will lift me up. But I'm looking outside of myself and it doesn't work. There aren't enough things outside of yourself that can ever properly fulfill you. All of that has to come internally. And it's actually funny that we're recording this today because when I was journaling this morning, I was reading. So I started my day this morning by reading some philosophy. And I was reading rereading this quote by Marcus Aurelius in Meditations. And basically, I've just been frustrated with some stuff and something wasn't working. Well, it wasn't that it wasn't working. It hadn't had the response that I wanted it to. And that's the important thing. It wasn't that it wasn't necessarily working. It hadn't had the response I wanted it to. And so essentially I wanted it to be praised and it hadn't been. And I went back to this passage from Meditations, which essentially is saying that like praise doesn't change the beauty of something. So a flower is beautiful whether it's praised or not. So my idea in this instance could have been good whether it's praised or not. So for me to get upset that it wasn't praised doesn't make any sense. And essentially I think that's how some of us live our life. We're chasing some sort of external validation. But actually, if what we're doing is good, if we are good people, or if we're happy or whatever, internally, fully, so that outward thing doesn't really matter. And so then I like was journaling to myself, and just as a reminder to myself. And then I sent it to some friends as well.
Art doesn't become art because somebody else says it's a painting. It's a painting.
Yeah.
I guess to throw a spanner in that thought, which is, I guess, the conventional thought, which is, but bills don't pay themselves.
That's true. And so I think there's work to be done. And I think that I'm not saying that people shouldn't care about their jobs, but I think you have to recognize where your line is and like when you're damaging yourself. And actually for a lot of people, I think it's just about boundaries. I think for a lot of us, it is just about creating boundaries. And those boundaries also go beyond our work. Like it's this idea that, if you've got a weekend and you've absolutely filled it with everything, like with socializing or with all the housework, or you think you need to be this and you need to be that. Yeah. And it's this idea that we're supposed to do it all.
Rest is actually meaning like to do nothing is something,
Yeah. And I think it's more, I just think that there needs to be a more honest conversation about what it does take to do certain things. So when the restaurant was open and I was writing, I'm also not doing a lot of things. I don't see a lot of my friends often because I can't do what I'm doing in other areas of my life and do that. And I think it's more that it's this idea that we think that we should be doing everything and therefore to do everything we shouldn't rest. Where it's like, well, no, if I want to have some rest, but I also want to work and put this much effort into Chikus, and I want to write this much, and I want to spend this much time with my family, something has to give. And so right now, for example, I made a conscious decision coming into this year that I was coming off social media because I needed to get certain things done. And I actually just looked at my time and I was like, I don't have time for endless scrolling. If I want to get my 8 hours sleep and do this and do that and do this other thing. And there's also a whole bunch of things I just don't engage with. Like my friends will mention stuff to me all the time. They're like, I don't know who you're talking about. They're like, oh my God, it's so-and-so. They do this thing. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't mentally have capacity to try and hold that information in or to read every news article that comes out that is going viral. I just don't engage in a lot of things so that I've got the space for the things that I do want to engage with. And then I think it's about working out what matters to you. And so for me, that's my family. Like my family massively matters. So in all the times, no matter how much I've been working, like for their birthdays, it's like a thing. I know exactly when all my siblings, like as my siblings' birthdays are approaching, it's always like, okay, what are we doing for it? My calendar is clear for it. Like that, they're non-negotiables. And then similar with my parents. And then similarly with some of my friends as well. It's like, okay, well, I might not be able to go for drinks every weekend, but for this thing that I know is important for you. So I know my friend, like my best mate's got her book coming out this year, and I've got that date in my head. Like whatever is happening around her launch, whatever she needs me to do during that time, I'm there for that.
Yeah.
And it's
amazing.
And I think it's a lot of just thinking about that, but recognizing you can't do everything, and there's no point trying to do everything. And actually, I don't think we even really want to do everything. We just think we do because we want to be able to prove we could have.
Yeah.
As if it was some kind of thing. But yeah, managing burnout is a really tricky one. I've got it wrong a lot. Dance has really helped me, but in terms of therapy, I do dance, but I also do have actual therapy with a therapist.
Yeah.
Big advocate. And that's been really important. Yeah, I found that really helpful in helping me stay balanced.
And I think
and I exercise a lot as well.
Yeah, and I think with entrepreneurship, you get a lot of knocks, and I think it's important that you in the same way you go to the doctor or the dentist, I think it's important that your mental health also takes priority. Spoken by, I guess all that advice was given from Forbes 100 women founders in Europe. So I'm adding small weights to do here. But where can everyone find you, find Chukus, order a meal kit, experience it, even though we're all in lockdown? Where can we find you on the DigiWeb?
So you can find me personally on my social media, Instagram, Twitter at Ifey_Frederick. I will be back. I just need to get some work done. Or I'm more present on LinkedIn. Actually on LinkedIn, I shared an article about my wellbeing lessons from burnout. There I'm on Ifeyinwa Frederick. You can follow Chikus at CHUKUSLDN. We're on all the main social media platforms. And if you head to our website, chikuslondon.co.uk, you can order yourself a Chop Chat meal kit as well. And I just wanted to say the thing that I'd forgotten, but it just came back to me that I was writing today, that I actually really want people to remember, because I think it really matters whether you're going to start your own business or whether you're even just like looking for love or just working on something or working on yourself. And the thing that I was writing this morning that was triggered by the reading I was doing in Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, which I highly recommend from anyone who wants to dip into ancient philosophy. The passage I wrote to myself that I was just thinking about, and I just wrote these words, and then I shared them, and I want to share them with your community as well, is that your worth is not contingent on any externality.
Your worth? Say that again.
Your worth is not contingent on any externality. And I think to go to end where we started, which was, when you asked me about Cambridge, I think that was a lesson. I went to Cambridge and I started learning there. And since then, I've been like really honing that lesson and really trying to internalize that. And I ultimately think that's where my burnouts were driven from, chasing something external to prove myself. And I think actually if more of us just recognize there isn't anything outside of ourselves that can validate us any more than we can, I think we'd all be better at making decisions and stopping when we need to stop, but we'd still get our bills paid.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ifeyinwa, for joining us on this week's episode. And we'll also have your handles and everything in the show notes.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Third Culture Africans. We are building a community of leaders and game changers and would love you to join in the conversation on thirdcultureafricans.com. Subscribe for news, for tips and more useful resources on today's topic and more episodes to ignite and inspire your entrepreneurial journey. Carry on the conversation on Facebook and Instagram at Third Culture Africans. Your ratings and reviews are important to us, so please leave one on your favorite streaming platform and help us amplify our voices. Until next time, you are valid, you are strong, and you are just getting started.